Welcome in, everybody. This is your self-care staffing for Thursday, May 14th, 2020. I am Lou Pascal. I'm the school social worker in the Manchester City Schools in Manchester, Tennessee. Today, I want to talk about how lists can be a part of your self-care practice. I love a good list. I'm a list maker from day one. So this could be just part of my personality. If it is, again, take what you like, leave the rest. I find that lists can be a big relief, a huge relief. So when I'm overwhelmed, sometimes my self-care practice is just to write it all down and get it out of my head. So I may have several lists going in my head. I may have tasks that I need to do, personal, professional. I may have 2 or 3 things floating around up there that I need to get at the grocery store. I may need to write down something that a family member said that they were going to be doing, and I know if I don't write it down, I am not going to remember it. And that is definitely a characteristic of mine, is that if I don't write it down, it doesn't get gelled into my memory. And it's not so much that I go back and reread everything that I wrote down, but there's something about that kinesthetic, body-based, physically writing something down on a piece of paper. I don't necessarily think for me that it works as well if I type it into a note in my phone. I need to write it down. So that's the way that I work. You may not, I don't know. But those are some ways that lists and writing things out can be helpful for me. Your lists can be aspirational. It can be a sort of a dream list. These are my 15 places that I would like to travel one day, or this is my list of the 10 things that I want when I build a house, or these are the 25 books I want to read in the next year. It can be aspirational like that. Lists in a practical way can save you a lot of work. So how can you, I think sort of in the tech world, they call this automating your workflow. So do you write the same grocery list every single week? You probably don't have to do that. I personally, my grocery list is pretty similar every single week. My meal plan is pretty similar every single week. I wouldn't necessarily need to write that down every week. I probably could automate that somehow. What I do, as I've said before, is on Saturday and Sunday in my planner, that's where I write my grocery list. And so I try to, my grandmother taught me this a long time ago, she had a sort of a spool of paper in her kitchen, and she would just always write things down right when she thought of it, especially if she had just run out of something. She would write it down on the list to get more, because she knew if she didn't, she wouldn't remember it later. So that's what I try to do. When I think of something I need, I try to go to my planner and write it down right then for the grocery store. I know that some of the grocery apps, you could probably do this in a different way and not have to write it down, but some of the grocery apps, I think they allow you to make a list, and it kind of holds that list throughout the week. Whatever works for you, but the general principle here is a list, to make a list. So if you travel a lot, are you making a list of what you need to take with you in your suitcase? You probably don't have to rewrite that list every time you travel. And there are few things more aggravating or few things that haunt me as much as being on my way somewhere and knowing good and well that I forgot something. I don't know what it is yet, but I can just have that sense that I've forgotten something. A lot of times it's Q-tips. So remember to put your Q-tips on your packing list. So try to think about things like that. Here's another example of automating your workflow. When especially at work, there have been over the years certain questions that people ask me repeatedly. Not the same person, but different people who just don't know. And so when I run into a situation like that, well, what's the procedure for XYZ? Or when I was when I was the area director of Special Olympics in Rutherford County, I would always get a question about how people could volunteer. And so what I did is I made a template email, and I would have to tweak it a little bit for each person that asked me, but I had the general information and I wasn't having to retype it over every time somebody asked me that question. So can you make a template email? I know for sure you can do this in Office 365, and I know you can do it in Gmail. So if that's something that you would find helpful, if you find yourself answering the same questions over and over and over again, make yourself a template email. You guys have seen companies do this. They'll have, their frequently asked questions, or when you go to the website for support, they've got things that they know people ask a lot, and they've already written out a response for you. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not, but it's that principle. So if you find yourself answering the same email over and over and over again, maybe make yourself a template, and then you save yourself some time. Instead of, it being an email that takes 5 minutes to write, you just take 1 minute and tweak it for that particular person, and then you're good to go. So that's a pro tip there for you. Don't rewrite things that you write often. An example of that, I have a template for each of these videos that I make. I found that I was doing the same thing every time, so I made myself a template so that I made sure to cover the things that I wanted to cover in every video that were the same, like the things that I leave with you guys at the end of the session. Those things are on my template, and I know that I'm looking for that for every video that I make. So, self-care check-in question is, how could list making become a part of your self-care? Again, for me, it just tones down some of that anxiety when there are a lot of things going on. It helps me offload some things from my brain, so I'm not trying to hold on to as many things when I'm feeling some anxiety. And you might hear the yard work going on, but it's okay. Hopefully it's not too distracting. We're going to keep going. So how could list making become a part of your self-care? So here's what I said. I would like to accomplish things on my list in my planner more quickly instead of rolling the same 3 undone tasks to the next week after week. So you guys know, you've had lists before, and it's a task that just never sort of bubbles to the top, and you keep rolling it over and over and over again. That is what I would like to do better. I've had a few tasks on my list for a long time, and I would like to start knocking those out and not be rolling those over every single week. So here are some quotes about lists. Some good quotes about lists and some things that might not be beneficial for you to do with a list. So the first one, she was merciless in her self-blame and her list of regrets and shortcomings. So maybe not use a list that way. Maybe not have a list that you recite to yourself all the time of your regrets and your shortcomings. That was Ashley Davis Bush from Simple Self-Care for Therapists. Here is another quote about lists. It was very liberating to realize that I could complete a project simply by dropping it, by eliminating it from my to-do list. And that was Ariana Huffington from the book called Thrive. And that is one that, I'll just be really honest, I'm hesitant to practice, to just complete, to drop something off my list and consider it completed, but it probably is something that I could do more often that would be beneficial to me. If you have things that have been on your list for 6 months and you haven't done them, you might need to ask yourself, or I might need to ask myself, am I really going to do that? Do I really have interest in doing that? Did that just sound like something that was a good idea? And I will tell you, I've gotten a whole lot more careful about writing things down, because if I write it down, then I feel like it was a promise that I made to myself. So I try to kind of have a little censorship process for myself, a little screening process. When I get ready to write something down, just kind of have that moment's hesitation. Am I sure I want to write that down? Am I sure I want to put that on my list? Do I really see myself doing that? Another quote, make a list of the goals, achievements, and qualifications you crave and post them where you will see them every day. Use the list to inspire yourself. That was Tom Rath from StrengthsFinder 2.0. We've used that book several times. Another quote, there was nothing like crossing things off her list to raise her spirits and her sights. And I definitely resonate with that comment. I love crossing things off my list. I've told you guys a story at least about the difference between Caleb and myself and how he does not care about crossing things off the list, and it really is something that I really get a lot of satisfaction from marking things off a list. So that quote was Stuart Onan from Emily Alone. It was a novel called Emily Alone. The last one, I feel satisfaction from clearing a list. And that was Elise Blaha Kripe. And I've told you guys, she's the one who designs the planner that I use, Get to Work book. And I took a class, an online class that she did called Inbox Bootcamp. And that was the quote was from the Inbox Bootcamp. It was a relatively quick class, but it was all about getting your email under control and not feeling so overwhelming. So I feel satisfaction from clearing a list. I absolutely do. So the song that I'm going to leave with you today about making lists is a little bit retro. It's called Biggest Part of Me by Ambrosia. And he says, make a list. That's one of the lyrics, make a list. The video, this is very amusing to me. So Snoop Dogg got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and he gave this speech, his, I guess, acceptance speech, and, thanking a lot of people at his Hollywood Walk of Fame star ceremony. And I wish I could cut about 5 seconds off this video, but my skills are not there yet to edit a video. But what he did is, it's an example of a list, and it's also a fantastic example of good self-talk. It's over the top. Most of us would probably feel extremely uncomfortable doing something like this, but he does all of his thank yous, and then he goes into a segment where he says, and I would like to thank me. And then he thanks himself for a lot of things that he did to get to that level of his career. And it's amusing to me, and I like his swagger. I'll just be really honest. We don't want to go around being arrogant, but, I think it's okay to recognize that you have accomplished something and to not really minimize yourself and apologize for it. So again, he makes a very long list of things he wants to thank himself for, and it's very good self-talk. And again, it's over the top, but honestly, some of us would be very benefited by getting even in the neighborhood of thinking of ourselves this way. I think we don't often give a lot of thought to good things that we've done, or if we start to feel like we've done some good things, we feel like it's bragging, we feel like it's arrogant, and we immediately start to try to minimize and validate, especially if we're talking with other people. So I liked that video, and it was amusing to me, and it was an example of a list. So again, if you find these videos helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe on YouTube. As I've said many times, I am coming to the end of my original commitment to make a video about self-care for every school day that we are closed during the school closures for COVID-19. My commitment extends to the end of next week, and I am thinking about how I will continue to deliver content about self-care after the end of next week, but I need to know that people are interested, and I need to know that you found this helpful. So if that applies to you, please subscribe on YouTube. And if all hearts and minds are clear, I will see you guys back here tomorrow for another self-care staffing.